Okay, gang, excitement times here. So I went ahead and I finished up machining the cylinder for the Efco 165. And the way that I was able to do that is I just took my table and locked it down, and I just used the XY function. You know, I got it where close enough to where the only thing that I needed to use was this and this. The big table, didn't use it. And so now that I've got this one done, I don't know, I might wait. I got a 372 clone project coming up, and I might just go ahead and wait until that one is done before I tear down my machine and figure out what's wrong with it. But whatever. Hey, I think that maybe I found a magic thing. All right. So the 162 cylinder on my 165. What's the difference between a 162 and a 165? 1 millimeter in stroke. I think that's it. I think. The 165 has a longer stroke. That's for certain. All right. They both have a 48 millimeter bore. The 165 has a 35 millimeter stroke, which gives you, let's see, I'm working it out right here. I do performancetrends.com, and that's where I do my engine displacement calculator. So 48 millimeter bore and 35 millimeter stroke gives you 63.334 cc's. The 162, you lose 1 millimeter. I think that's all it is. And you have 61.525. So, anyways, the 165 has the same bore and stroke as the new 6510 and 6500. All right, but the 6500 and 6510 are in a bigger chainsaw chassis. So that's why I like this one. You got the bore and stroke that gives you the 63 something cc's. I've already forgotten it. $63.334. You got that long 35 millimeter stroke, so you get good torque. Anyway, so that millimeter doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. It really makes your transfers really different. And I like using a Johnson Red 630 piston in these. You got to be able to do some work. You got to be able to do some machine work and things like that because they don't fit. They're not a straight swap in. They might be pretty darn close if you kept the base gasket. But anyways, you can't just throw one in there, right? The reason I like using it is it's a single ring piston, not a double ring piston. The Efco pistons have 2 rings, right? So I don't want that. This one will show you better. I don't want those 2 rings. I want a single ring. Why? Because dual rings don't do anything for you. They don't. They give you better static compression whenever you're pulling it over, but when that saw is running, I don't think that they do anything extra for you. A single ring is just as good for holding in your compression, and it's less friction on the cylinder, so you can spin higher RPMs and more freely. It'll rev up more quickly and everything. So I like a single ring piston. So a lighter piston with the Johnson Red and a single ring piston with the Johnson Red, and it has a taller crown, a taller piston crown. And so that just gives you a lot better options if you're looking to machine that chamber, right? You could very easily cut a pop-up in that and all kinds of stuff, even though the 165 has a staggered chamber. So cutting a pop-up in there wouldn't be easy because it's not centric. Centric, is that it? Even is that the right word? So anyways, I've got all the machine work done, and I've got it timed out to you know, just simply, you know, where the numbers fail. I have not ported it yet, and that is a that's like, it's not the word, because that truly implies that I'm going to port it. I might just stop with the machine work, right? And I want you guys to give me your info on that, you know, what you think. So let me show you. Up in there, the chamber, now this is a 162 cylinder. The chamber on the 162 is centered, right? It is not off to one side, the front or back, right? It's centered. And we have that cut at a 10-degree angle, all right? Now this, look at me, I'm getting all excited. There we go. This is the Johnson Red piston, right? And it has 10-degree, can't even see it. It's not much at all. This will show you. There it is. That's the angle right there. You got a 10-degree angle on this, right? Freaking flies. So the reason for doing that angle means that it drops the piston crown down further, right? Yet you still have material that's coming up and going into your combustion chamber. So you can do two things with these taper-topped pistons, all right? And this is why, you know, the guys that are building the really fast stuff, firewood saws, you know, are oftentimes going to tapered now. It's kind of like the hot thing to do, right? Because what has been figured out, not by me, I'm just following along, right, is that this allows you to have like a pop-up, but there's no pop-up, all right? So it's smooth transition. Builders don't like pop-ups usually because it's a step like that, and it screws up your flow. This has more even flow. So it allows you to get up in there in that combustion chamber and get your compression that you're seeking, right? It allows that to happen while at the same time dropping the height of the piston itself, which means that your transfers will open sooner without you having to raise them. We don't want to touch the transfers if we don't have to. Frickin' get out of here, flies! Ah! Scared them away. They'll never come back. So why don't you want to touch the transfers unless you have to? Because every time you touch those transfers, you F it up. So do I. So does that guy. So does that guy. So does that girl if she's doing it. Everybody does it. They're best almost exclusively. Everything, the transfers are best if you just left them alone. Until you start getting into some of the Chinese stuff and they have this really terrible flow going on and everything. But this has very nice transfers. Let me show you. It has really nice, really small transfers, and they're nicely textured, not overboard. You know, they're just right. All right, so I don't want to touch them unless I have to. Now the bottom transfer, I might need to touch that up a little bit. I haven't checked yet, but I might need to touch it up so that it lines up perfectly well. Sometimes that piston goes so far down that the bottom transfer is being closed off by the piston, and you want that open as often as long as possible. So a lot of times what you have to do is that sealing right there of the bottom transfer, you raise that to match the openings on the piston. You can see where the stock piston stopped right at the top, right smack at the top of that. Now with this new Johnson Red piston, it might be stopping. Let me see if I can do this. I'll have to check and see, measure it out. Damn flies, they came back. They came back. If, let's say, we're stopping right, say there, right? Well, then that bottom transfer, you cut in there and you raise that up to meet where the piston stops. Also, might want to widen that a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe not. We're going to see how this goes. But it's looking like I'm not going to have to touch the transfers, the upper transfers at all, which is exactly what I want because these are my numbers. All right. Look at that. After the tapered piston top plus machine work, we are looking at the intake is at 78 degrees. At least for now, I can totally live with that. That's a good number, but I might be doing some work on the carburetor, and that's just perfect. It's just perfect. The exhaust, we're at 100, so we are going to raise that up a lot. And then the transfers are at 114, which is why we're going to raise that up a lot. All right, could it run there? Absolutely, and it would probably run good. But I think that I'm going to go ahead and try and push the limits with this saw and get it to run fast. Not just good, but fast. Now, that 78 degree intake, I want you to remember that. So, let's see if I can get this all out, because it's difficult to do. It's difficult to organize it in my own head, let alone actually speak it out to you guys. A 78 degree intake is, typically speaking, excellent intake timing for a work saw, right? And, well, a lot of times with these hotter saws, what people tend to do is they lower the floor of that transfer, which means it opens sooner. Let's say opening at 82 degrees. Well, this can be very good, right? It gives more time for that carburetor to flow into your crankcase and fill it up with your air and fuel mixture. However, for every little amount that we change that and we open it longer, we also are minimizing the amount of time that we have when that piston comes down and begins to pressurize our bottom end so that it can flow up above to the top of the piston. The reason this is important, right? There's pressure above the piston. An explosion just took place. Are you with me? An explosion just took place. So it's a high pressure environment at the top of that piston. Well, the sooner we open up our exhaust, the more time we have to release that pressure, right? Get that pressure out of there, which means then in turn, the less pressure we need to get above the piston in our transfers. Everything plays together. Two strokes are like a ballet. If one person trips and falls, they can fuck it all up. And you can't forget about that. For every change I make over here, then I might need to correct over here. And you got to see the whole picture so that you're not just shooting yourself in the foot whenever you make these changes. So, okay. Why is 78 degrees good? Because it blends two things. Number one, it gives a lot of intake opening time compared to most stock configurations, right? Most stock configurations are going to be 4 degrees or so different from that, which is a total actually of 8 degrees, because you not only have the time that it opens is 4 degrees earlier, whenever it comes back down, it closes 4 degrees later, right? So a 74 degree intake is going to give you 148 degrees of duration, right? Well, the 78 degrees is going to give you, what is it, 156 degrees of duration? I believe that's right. Yeah, 156 degrees of duration. So anyways, 78 is just a nice balance with a good amount of time for the intake to be open so that it can receive, have plenty of time to receive a nice fresh air and fuel mixture, right? At the same time, it's going to close soon enough so that piston has time to pressurize your crankcase and shoot that that mixture to the top of the piston. It's just nice, right? Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could get the same amount of fuel of a 182, no, I'm sorry, 82. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get the same amount of fuel and air that an 82 degree intake has, but have the same bottom end compression whenever that piston comes down of, say, a 76 degree intake opening? Yes, that would be nice. How do we accomplish this? Well, we accomplish this by making sure that our intake side is flowing as good as possible, which means a lot of times the manufacturers do a lot of things like swirls, what's it called? Ridges in the intake, which can promote laminar flow. Some of them do like little cat's tongue looking things. Whenever we port, quite oftentimes, many porters do, they surface the intake and texture it so that the air is tumbling. And whenever it tumbles, it's mixing up, as well as those little voids fill with air and help laminar flow. But the big thing and the real simple thing is put a bigger carburetor on. All right. Now, you can't do this with everything. Not everything can do it. Some things already have an appropriately sized carb. A really good one with this is the Poland Pro 415, 425. Those saws right there. Why do those things come alive so well? Well, it's a combination of different things, but they were just really well engineered. The bottom end is small, right? So it doesn't need as much air and fuel mixture to properly fill it up. And the carburetor is sized really well in order to capably, to do that. It's really a capable sized carburetor. Well, what I noticed with these Efcos is they got a pretty small little carburetor. They do. They've got a pretty small little carburetor. And I don't know what you can tell, but it's not very big. The layout, I believe it is an HDA, but regardless of, HDA 2250. It is an HDA carburetor, which means it's extremely similar to a 357 XP carb. And so I grabbed a 357 XP carb. Where's it at? Where's it at? That's 590. There. 357 XP carb. Let me see if I can hold these open for you, and so that you can see precisely what's going on. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is madness. 357 XP carb, Efco carb. Probably looks about the same to you guys, but I assure you, it is not. The Efco carburetor on the inside, the Venturi, tapers down. The 357 does not. And 357 is how many cc's? 56. 56 cc's, right? Which means it has a much smaller amount of fuel and air that it needs compared to the 63.34 cc's of this 165. So, and I noticed that the 162 and the 165 both had the same size carburetor. They're identical. So my guess is it's undercarbed, which is why it doesn't really want to get up there in those higher RPMs. Because if you switch out from, I was talking with Jake and Andy about this, right? Your carburetor, let's say your carburetor, you have a regular garden hose, right? It has a finite amount that it can possibly flow, right? And if you go from 56 cc, we're going to call that a 3-gallon bucket, to a 63 cc 5-gallon bucket, right? But you've still got the same water hose. You can fill both buckets. It just takes more time to fill up the 63 cc or 5-gallon bucket, right? Well, how do you fill up that bucket as fast as you can fill up the 3-gallon bucket? You replace your water hose with a fucking fire hose, all right? Now, like I said, this doesn't work all the time. And if you go too big, then you lose your bottom end and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff. However, what I'm thinking is with this 165, with those numbers right there, I've got a 78-degree exhaust. Now, before, whenever I ported this thing, I had, what was it? I think I just misspoke something there. Whenever I ported this saw before, right, I had 79 degrees on the intake. 79 degrees on the intake, 124 on the transfers, and 101 on the exhaust. I just wanted it to be a nice solid work saw, and that's what I got, a nice solid work saw. But if I had, with that setup, even at lower RPMs, I think that the carburetor was holding it back. So I'm going to bore this carburetor out. And then with a 78-degree intake, I think I'm going to still be able to really maximize and open up and feel my combustion crankcase, really as full as I can feel it, because I'll have a bigger carburetor. And then with the 78-degree intake, it's going to come down and have plenty of time to compress that and send it up above the piston. Another thing that is a benefit, we keep going here, on and on and on, all right? The 165 has significantly larger transfers. Now, I know there's a bunch of bumblefuck hillbillies out there that think that transfers have to be big, all right? Now, they can really work in your advantage. I've seen lots of race saws with crazy huge transfers. As long as you can fill them up, as long as you've got a proper intake set up and carburetor set up that will fill up that big void that you're creating whenever you hog this shit out, then it's fine, right? Some saws can't do it at all, right, with their carburetor. Other saws are just fine. A great example of that is the Efco 4910. It's got plenty of carburetor to make that thing really scream up top. It's got lots of carburetor. And so you don't have to swap that out whenever you do that stuff to the 4910. But on this one, I think what was really holding back the 165 cylinder was two things. One, it had more displacement than the smaller saws that came before it that are on the same chassis, right? And if it has more displacement, then you automatically need a bigger carburetor. But they were putting the same effing carburetor. I think that even on the 156, which is 56 cc's, right? I think it had this exact same carburetor. And they used it for the 156, the 162, and the 165, which is bullshit. You need more carburetor. Your displacement went up. But also, their transfers got bigger. So literally, this carburetor was completely incapable of sustaining higher RPMs with this, because you've got a bigger bucket. You got a bigger bucket that you've got to fill up. Their standard water hose ain't going to work. So I'm either going to try and adapt a larger carburetor to this new setup right here, right? But more than likely, I will be perfectly fine with this carburetor. Just bore it out. And so I'm going to bore out this carburetor and see how that works. Another thing that I got going for me, again, it's the 162 cylinder that I'm using, and it has small little transfers. Small transfers, well, there's not as much space, so they're easier to fill up. See what I'm saying? Hopefully this will work and be a real fire cat. I don't know if it will or not. I'm just doing the best that I can here. Any suggestions you guys may have, I love to put it down in the comment. I love reading it. But yeah, I think this might work out really nice and be a really, really nice running little saw. But we'll see. It is possible that the larger displacement actually requires the larger transfers, because yeah, if the bottom end is only carrying 56 cc's of displacement in the bottom, right, then you can fill that up to the maximum, and it's still not going to be enough to fill up the top end, which is 63 cc's. So, you know what I'm saying? But usually the bottom ends are big enough. They can hold an abundance of air-fuel mixture, and then whenever that piston comes down, it's going to be going through those little transfers under higher pressure fast, right? So, hopefully this is going to work out well, and I'm going to be able to make this thing really scream. Fingers crossed.